Psst. Ever used AI to chat about something random? Too bad. You probably depleted the Great Lakes by at least one bottle. Sounds ridiculous. It was just a couple of sentences. But AI isn't some invisible cloud floating in the sky. It's physical. To really touch AI, you don't open an app. You walk into a data center. And if you've ever launched a heavy game on an old laptop, you already know what happens next. The poor thing heats up fast. Now multiply that heat across tens of thousands of servers running non-stop. And yes, one ChatGPT request cost the planet roughly a bottle of water. Wait, why specifically the Great Lakes? What does freshwater have to do with AI in data centers? Simple. Those massive data centers, just like that overheating laptop, must be cooled. And nothing does that better than water. We've already seen the pressure in places like Chile, where local communities have reported severe drought concerns around data center growth. It has become way harder to cultivate crops and actually live your normal life there. And now a $15 billion data center build-out is being proposed in the Great Lakes region. And that's where the tension begins. The Great Lakes hold roughly 20% of the world's surface freshwater, a reserve so vast it underpins North American industry, agriculture, and cities. For decades, the lakes were treated as effectively inexhaustible, but scientists are now very skeptical about it. The concern isn't that one data center will drain the lakes, it's the stacking effect. More cooling withdrawals, more warm water discharge, more shoreline development, and more grid infrastructure concentrating in the same basin, all while drought pressures and lake level swings are already in play. AI-scale data centers are estimated to use more than 365 million gallons of water per year, roughly what 12,000 Americans use annually. Much of that water leaves the facility significantly warmer. In systems that aren't fully closed loop, a portion, sometimes around 20%, can be discharged back into wastewater systems or nearby waterways, potentially stressing local ecosystems. There may be a workaround though, and this is where Chicago enters the picture. Instead of pulling fresh water, some planners are looking at water that cities already struggle to manage. Chicago operates one of the largest tunnel and reservoir systems in the world, designed to capture stormwater and sewage that would otherwise overflow into waterways during heavy rain. The system can store nearly 12 billion gallons. In theory, this stored wastewater could help cool future data centers in the Chicagoland region, reducing pressure of freshwater supplies. But it's not automatic. Using reclaimed water requires careful site planning. For example, positioning new data centers near wastewater treatment facilities and building the extra infrastructure to move and manage that water safely. It's more complex, more expensive, but technically feasible. So, why use the Great Lakes, you may ask? Probably because it's just cheaper?
For eons, the Red Sea has separated the continents of Asia and Africa. They're close enough to wave at each other, but far enough that moving between them requires planning. Ferries do the job, but it's time for something better. That's why engineers have envisioned an ambitious mega project of tunnels and bridges that will not only link the two continents, but also reshape the region forever. Millions of years ago, the Arabian landmass slowly drifted away from Africa, opening a watery scar that we now call the Red Sea. This place is famous for its crystal clear water that looks filtered even when it isn't, as well as for coral reefs that seem to be painted by an overachieving artist. Let's zoom in on one specific location, the Strait of Tiran. Every ship headed toward the upper ports squeezed through this one busy hallway. On the one side is Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula, rugged, golden, and sprinkled with resort towns. On the other side, it's Saudi Arabia, the Tabuk coast, where quiet desert hills stroll right down to neon blue water. The distance between them looks tiny on a map, almost like someone forgot to connect the lines. That's because the strait is only about 8 miles from peninsula to peninsula, close enough that on a clear day you can sometimes see the opposite shoreline. It's a busy gateway, and it's the exact gap designers want to turn into a direct road and rail link. So what are they actually trying to build? The idea is to create one continuous route between the Sinai Peninsula and the Tabuk coast. Engineers are still deciding whether it should be a bridge, a tunnel, or a hybrid, the combination of two. The problem is under the water. Near the shore, the bottom is shallow enough to support strong columns, but as you move farther out, the seabed drops quickly until it reaches about 900 feet. It's almost like walking off an underwater cliff. That sudden plunge is too deep for standard bridge supports. The design has to adjust to the landscape instead of forcing one shape across the whole gap. If they go with a bridge, the builders would place huge steel tubes called caissons on the seafloor. Think of them as giant metal buckets. Once they're in position, the water gets pumped out so crews can build a dry foundation inside. Concrete turns that space into a pillar rising from the seabed. The floating cranes drop long road sections between those pillars like puzzle pieces. It works well in shallow areas, but anchoring becomes difficult in deep waters due to high pressure, soft ground, and strong waves. Tunnels avoid this by going under the problem, literally. Crews can send tunnel boring machines called worms, or they can build submarine-sized tunnel segments on land and sink them into place. It's the same trick used in the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Megalink, which proves it works even in busy, deep water. Now, people might look at the map and think, 8 miles? That doesn't sound so bad. In reality, it's nothing like tossing a giant tree trunk over a river and calling it a bridge. Cars, buses, and trains need those long, slow, friendly ramps that don't feel like a roller coaster. By the time you build those ramps on both sides, the whole thing could stretch to nearly 20 miles. That puts it in the same club as giants like the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel in the US or the King Fahd Causeway between Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. But it's not just the scale or unpredictable seabed that makes this intercontinental project challenging. There's also the climate. Temperatures regularly pass 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Concrete dries faster than planned, so crews have to cool it or work in shorter windows. Steel stretches in the heat just enough to make precise work annoying. And workers themselves cannot stand in direct sunlight for long without feeling like a baked potato. On top of that, the salty sea air chews through metal quicker than most people expect, so the whole structure needs tough protective layers and regular checkup. If this project gets the green light, you're looking at a timeline of several years. A good comparison is the Øresund link between Denmark and Sweden. It's only about 10 miles long and still took around 4 years to build, in an environment that is much easier to handle than the Red Sea. Then there's the price tag. Early numbers land around $4 billion, but that feels more like a starting guess than a final bill. If they run into problems, that figure will almost certainly climb. There's also one other problem that must be brought up: swimming right under the surface. The Strait of Tiran is home to dolphins, rays, sea turtles, and even sharks, including harmless reef sharks that glide around like they're protecting the beautiful, colorful corals below. These reefs aren't just decoration, they're some of the healthiest in the entire Red Sea. Scientists say that in parts of the northern Red Sea, some corals tolerate higher temperatures than many others around the world, which makes these reefs especially valuable from a climate resilience perspective. That means even a single mistake during construction could cloud the water with sediment, and that alone can smother corals like dust settling on wet paint. The same goes for noise, drilling, and ship movement. Reefs can't exactly move away if annoyed like fish can. Once they're damaged, it can take decades for them to grow back. That is, if they grow back. To avoid that, planners have to build in ways that keep the water as clear and calm as possible. Construction zones may need silt curtains to stop sediment from drifting away. Heavy equipment might have to avoid areas with dense coral clusters. Some sections could lean more toward tunnels instead of pillars to leave the seabed undisturbed. Every decision has to match the underwater map, not just the one on land. On top of that, the whole project would need constant supervision from scientists and inspectors. They would have to check how cloudy the water becomes and how marine animals behave during the work. If something looks off, the only responsible move is to slow down or change the method, instead of just rushing to finish faster and leaving the reef to pay the price. But if everything finally clicks into place, the payoff is massive. Right now, if you decide to skip the ferry and stay on land, the map punishes you. You have to loop all the way around the top of the Red Sea, through other countries on a drive more than 1,000 miles. All of that just to cross a stretch of water that is only a few miles wide at its narrowest point. It's like walking around the entire block just to knock on your neighbor's door. A permanent link would change this. Travel time drops, ports on both sides become easier to reach, and a drive from Africa to Asia suddenly feels as normal as crossing a long highway bridge. Not to mention the coolest part, which would be the view if they decided on the hybrid version. You begin your journey on the Sinai side, with the desert behind you and the Red Sea ahead. Instead of waiting in a ferry line, you roll onto a rising ramp while the water glimmers below. The road dips into a tunnel under a busy shipping lane, and before long, you're back in the sunlight on the other side, now on a different continent. The train version could feel even smoother. You find your seat, the doors close, and the train glides toward the crossing without any stop-and-go traffic. It slips into its own tunnel section, runs quietly under the sea, and pops back up on the Asian side before you have even finished scrolling your feed. For tourists, that could mean more resorts, more quick weekend trips, and a brand new continental hop that becomes a must-try experience. For delivery trucks, every hour saved is money earned. Even local towns would feel the change. They'd get more visitors, more trade, and bigger profits. A link like this doesn't just connect land, it connects economies, ports, and everyday life. And that's a giant opportunity, as long as the underwater world stays protected.
So a few years ago, in 2019, folks in Australia said they liked an old idea with a new twist, using extra floodwater from the north to help dry areas in the west and south. This plan got the name of the New Brainfield Scheme. It was based on an old idea from the 1930s. The idea was to catch floodwater from the north and move it to the south and west. But the original plan never actually happened. Over the years, lots of experts said it wouldn't work. They thought it was too expensive and too tricky to build, even though it could potentially help fix drought problems in dry parts of Queensland. The original idea appeared a long time ago, when an engineer named John Brainfield got a big idea. He wanted to take floodwater from rivers in northern Queensland and send it inland to Lake Erie, one of the driest spots in Australia. He planned to use dams, pumps, really big pipes, and even tunnels to transport all that water over the Great Dividing Range, a big mountain range in Australia. The biggest dam would have been called Hell's Gate, and Brainfield wanted it twice as tall as what it was originally planned. This way, pumps and gravity could help move the water over the Great Dividing Range. The water would then flow south and help irrigate farmland near places like Hughenden. It would change the weather, make it rain more, and turn the dry land into green farms. Eventually, it would reach Lake Erie, turning the desert into a green growing area. That way, Australia could grow more food, sell it to other countries, and make more jobs. He hoped that the area could turn into a food bowl for the country. For some time, people talked about the plan a lot. They loved the idea. They thought it could change how farming worked. And some even believed that nature had already planned for the land to be filled with water. Dry rivers and lake beds were just waiting to be used. They even said that rains fell on the wrong side of the mountains, and Brainfield's plan could fix that. But when the authorities looked into this idea, they found big problems. And the main one was that the plan would cost too much. Plus, there weren't enough scientists or engineers to do a full investigation. The land was too dry and harsh. No one was sure it would even work, like how much water would really get there. Plus, some of Brainfield's measurements were wrong, especially the dam heights. So, in 1947, they officially shut the project down, claiming that even if they built the project, it wouldn't be worth it. After all, even places next to oceans, like parts of Chile, still stay bone dry, so a big lake might not result in more rain. And still, in 2019, one political party brought the idea back with an updated version called the New Brainfield Scheme. They wanted to try it again, but with some changes to make it work better. Their plan included the following steps. Take water from the South Johnstone, Tully, Herbert, and Burdekin rivers. Store that water using a big dam called Hell's Gate Dam. But this time, they wanted to make the dam twice as tall as in the original plan. Let the water flow through tunnels using gravity instead of using lots of pumps. Move the water under the mountains and into the Warrego River in southern Queensland. Use the water to grow crops in dry places south and west of Hughendon, a huge area even bigger than Tasmania, eventually turning it into a food bowl. At the same time, they didn't say how much the whole project would cost, but they promised to spend $20 million to let Australia's National Science Agency check if the plan could work. Those innovative ideas sounded good, but for over 80 years, loads of experts kept saying, "Nope, it won't work." Why? Branfield said his idea would cost £40 million back in 1941. That's about $3.2 billion today. But the new version of the plan might cost more than $15 billion and take over 10 years to build. Also, people who care about nature are worried. They explain that taking water away from where it usually goes could hurt animals and plants. It might let invasive plants and animals spread to new places. It might mess up rivers and oceans, where fish and other animals live. It could even hurt towns and businesses near the coast that depend on those natural water flows. Still, some people really believed in the idea and thought it was worth doing, especially to help farmers and fix drought problems. However, in 2022, the government decided to stop trying to fix the drought in western Queensland with the Branfield scheme. Experts looked closely at the plan and said it just wouldn't work. The problem? There's not enough water all the time to make it happen. Apparently, the new cost of the plan would have been over $30 billion. That's a huge amount of money. You could buy yourself a fleet of private jets and luxurious yachts, and more. So experts said you'd need lots and lots of water to spend that kind of money, but the water just isn't there. Now, instead of one huge project, they suggested doing smaller water projects closer to where the rain and waterfalls are. These smaller projects, called mini Branfield grids, would be in 4 places along the Queensland coast. Those little grids could share water when some places had more or less rain. Other scientists looked at the plan too, and they agreed. Even if things went super well, the Branfield scheme would still cause problems and cost way too much, while the mini water grids project looks more plausible. They think the dry parts west of the mountains will do better without the full-scale Branfield scheme. There are easier and cheaper ways to help those places grow and get water. So the big plan was dropped, and now they're looking at smarter, smaller ideas to help with water and farming. And the matter is quite urgent. Australia is a super dry place, one of the driest places people actually live in. When there's a drought, there's not much water around. That means farms don't grow as much food, and that can cause a lot of problems. In the future, droughts are likely to happen more often and be worse. That's why it's necessary to start getting ready now. Experts are working on something called the Drought Resilience Mission, trying to figure out how to deal with droughts better in the future. One of them looked at how much droughts actually cost Australia. His research shows that droughts can hurt a lot of things – farms, jobs, towns, and even the whole country. When there's no rain for a really long time, some towns can actually run out of water. That's called Day Zero. It's when the taps in people's houses get turned off because there's just no water left. In 2020, a town in Queensland called Stanthorpe hit Day Zero. About 50 other towns were really close too. When such a situation happens, the only way to get water is by bringing it in with trucks, and that's super expensive. Stanthorpe had to get around 20 trucks of water every day for a year and a half. It cost them about $800,000 every month. In the end, they spent over $14 million just to have water. Luckily, it started raining again and filled the dams back up. But the authorities are working on ways to stop this kind of thing from happening again. They want to help towns be ready so they never run out of water like that. Because drought just doesn't mess with water, it can also mess with people's health. When everything dries up, plants vanish and the soil gets loose. Then the wind picks it up and makes huge dust storms. Those dust clouds can blow really far, even into such big cities as Sydney. That's what happened in 2018. The air got so bad that kids, older people, and anyone with breathing problems had to be extremely careful. The dust ruined some crops and made different foods, even fruit, unsafe to eat. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.